Hi friends, my name is Gabby and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be starting a new series called Classic Book Reviews. So the title of the series makes it pretty self-explanatory, but what I'm going to be doing is reading some classic books and scoring them based on 10 different categories. Those categories are plot, main characters, supporting characters, setting, dialogue, style, opening, climax, ending, and themes. I'm going to be scoring the books on each of these categories on a scale from 1 to 10, which will give them a total score out of 100. At the end of the video, I will be giving my score and letting you know where it falls in the ranks of the other books I've read so far in this series. And I'm going to be starting off with 1984 by George Orwell. Now, I haven't started reading this yet. I've had this book for years and just never picked it up until I decided to do this series. Pretty much all I know walking into it is that we deal with themes of thought crimes, and there is I believe it's an organization called Big Brother. I don't know if it's part of like the government in this world or what it is, because this is a negative utopia story. So I'm not entirely sure what Big Brother is in the context of the story. I'm just familiar with the concept that you're always being watched and things of that nature. I also know that this made an appearance on the New York Times bestseller list in 2016, shortly after that year's presidential election here in the States. I don't really know too much about this, so I'm really excited to get started. I'll be checking in when I'm about halfway through the book. I'll let you know my thoughts, and then I will be back once I'm finished to give a final wrap up and to give it its score. Hi, I'm back. It's been a few days and I am now a little more than halfway through the book. I am just getting ready to start reading part 3. And I'm probably going to start reading as soon as I'm done filming this. I'm really excited to get back to it. So my thoughts so far. The beginning was interesting at first, but it got pretty slow after the first maybe 30 pages. After we were introduced to some of the characters and experienced some of the world, I felt Orwell spent a lot of time world building, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it seemed as though Winston was living in the world but wasn't a part of it. And for all I know, Orwell did that on purpose, just to really emphasize the difference between this world that Winston's living in and Winston as a character, to really give him that sense of otherness in this world, which worked. It really made him seem like the outsider in his own home, pretty much. So because of that kind of feeling, I really had to convince myself to pick the book back up when I was still in part 1 trying to get through it, because it just felt really slow to me, like nothing was happening. I still didn't know what the basis of the plot was going to be. So I really had to talk myself into it. But that was not the case once I got to part 2. Part 2 was when we really see Winston involve himself in the world. Starts his relationship with Julia. He really just starts becoming more, I feel like, fully fleshed out as a character. I started to actually care about him in this section of the book. And he felt more like a real person and not just a robot in a flesh suit. I do believe that was done intentionally, but it did make, as I said, part 1 pretty difficult for me to want to read. That interpersonal connection that he starts getting in part 2 is what really got me excited and invested in his story. And I'm just gonna say it now, if you haven't read this book, spoiler alert, but I'm really excited to get to part 3 because him and Julia just got discovered and found out by the thought police, and they are getting arrested. So I'm really interested to see kind of more in-depth into the Ministry of Love and the thought police, the tactics that they use for torture and interrogation, how Winston reacts to that level of mistreatment, I guess would be the word. So I'm really looking forward to getting to this, and I will see you guys in just a second once I'm done, and we'll go through my thoughts, we'll score. So I will see you guys in just a second. So I'm back. It's the next day. I ended up finishing it all in one sitting, and I'm ready to discuss. All right, for plot, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. While I think it's really strong, there are parts where I felt like it dragged and some pages could have been cut and there could have been a little more action or just general interaction with other people. I think it's really strong, but there are some things that I would have liked to see instead or in addition to what was also happening. Main characters, I'm giving Winston an 8. I think he's super realistic, and while he could have been a little more interesting, he's still a really solid character. Supporting characters, I'm considering them Julia and O'Brien, and I'm giving them a 6. I think, again, they could have been more interesting. We could have seen a little more from them, but considering what we did see, I think Julia was pretty interesting. The fact that she was kind of rebelling, but didn't really care that all facts were being changed openly. I think that made her pretty interesting, and I would really wanted to see more of her philosophy and the way that she thinks about things. I think that could have made her a lot more interesting of a character if we understood her a little better and got some more time with her. And for O'Brien, he was super fascinating. I really enjoyed him as a character. Again, wish we could have known a little more about his backstory and why he thinks the way that he does, but overall, really fascinating character. So they could have scored higher, but overall, 6 out of 10. Next, we have setting. As far as I know, this was the first book to do this sort of government controls everything that you do and think and say. So for that, I'm giving setting an 8 out of 10. Really great. Dialogue, we are giving it an 8 out of 10. While I wish there had been more dialogue, I do understand that that is part of what makes the setting so fascinating, because it has such an impact on the way that the characters interact with each other. So for that, I'm giving dialogue 8 out of 10. Next, we have style. While I really enjoyed Orwell's writing, I do feel it was a little slow at points and that there could have been a little more action. That's just my personal taste. So for style, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Opening, it's getting a 5 out of 10 for me. This is the lowest scored section. I just really didn't like the first part. I felt like it really dragged. I think that it could have been either a lot quicker paced or a lot shorter. I feel like that would have made it more impactful. I understand that it kind of had to drag out to show the kind of uniformness of every day, to show everything's always the same, nothing ever changes except for what is considered the truth. So I understand it. It's just not my favorite. So that's why it's getting a 5 out of 10. Next, we have conflict. I would have liked for the conflict to be a little more obvious. You didn't know the conflict was really happening until it was already happening. So I kind of enjoyed that it sprung up on me, but also I would have liked for it to be a little more obvious so I could really take it in and enjoy it, because conflicts are always my favorite part of the book. Wish it would have been a little more, but it wasn't. So that's why it's getting a 7 out of 10. Next, we have ending. Ending, I'm giving a 9 out of 10. This is the highest scoring section of the book. I think that it was beautifully written, and as unfortunate as it is that we see Winston be completely crushed by Big Brother, and as devastating as that is, I think that the fact that it's devastating is what makes it so beautiful, because we're rooting for him so hard, and then to just have to sit there and watch all of his passion and fire and drive just get sucked out of him. He's so impactful, and I really loved it. So 9 out of 10. Finally, we have theme. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. I think that the themes that are mentioned in this book of the freedom to think and speak without repercussions or fearing for your life is super important. Now, while freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from repercussions from other people, we definitely should have the freedom to speak without being afraid that the government is going to arrest us or kill us. So I think that's super important to really be able to see how sad life can be if we don't have that freedom. So 8 out of 10. And with all of those scores together, 1984 by George Orwell gets a total score of 72 out of 100. It was a really great book. There are some things that I would have liked more, but overall, really solid. One thing I forgot to mention in the beginning, at the end of these videos, I'm going to announce which book I'm reading as the next installment for this series. And that book is going to be Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I recently read the script from the movie with some of my theater friends, and I really loved it. I read as Mr. Lawrence, I believe. Yes, Mr. Lawrence. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it, so I'm really looking forward to getting started on the book. I do have one book that I'm in the middle of reading, just from my January TBR, not related to this series at all, but I'm super excited to get started on Little Women, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!